Greetings, test takers. This is Dean Tenney coming to you from my studio here in fabulous Las Vegas. We always are trying to do or mix it up, stay diversified in terms of the types of lectures you find on the channel. Our videos range anywhere from 15 minutes to 2 hours, so quite a mix. Now, when I do a little carve-out lecture like this, we'll see what it comes in at. What I try and do is pick a subject that would be appropriate for as many exams as possible. So retail communication, I would expect you could see high probability, something on your SIE, your 6, your 7, your 10, your 24. Now, obviously the 10, 24 might go a little more depth than what I'm going to do in this little ditty, so to speak. So, but anyways, we'll talk about some test issues, and hopefully you'll feel a little better prepared for retail communication questions on your exam. So the first major distinction, we need to make is the distinction or definition about correspondence versus retail communication. You know, sometimes you might see retail communication referred to as sales literature. And the reason that definition is important because that's the testable distinction, the definition, and then based on that definition, when does a principal have to approve it? So the definition, let me get out my annotation tool. The definition of written or electronic, by the way, let's just talk about that. Over and over and over again, FINRA said they make no distinction between whether communications are made through written form or electronic form. And so don't fall for any kind of a trick on the test that says there's some kind of difference between the two. There is no testable distinction between those two types of communication. Anyways, the test question is the definition: 25 or fewer retail investors and within a 30-day calendar period. So the reason that definition is important because that leads to our follow-up test question, which is the principal can approve that pre or post review. So it's up to your general securities principal to decide whether he wants to do it pre-distribution or post-distribution. On the other hand, looks like my slide is stuck here. On the other hand, if it's retail communication, and again, the definition is the testable distinction again, because if we don't know the definition, then we don't know, what we're being asked to do. And the definition here is more than 25 retail investors. So 25 or fewer is correspondence, can be approved pre or post distribution, very testable. More than 25 retail communication, sometimes referred to on the test as sales literature. Any person other than institutional investors, we don't really care about protecting institutional investors because they're capable of protecting their own assets, their own interests. Now, if for some reason we think that institutional communication can find its way to a retail customer, like maybe we have shared offices for something, shared offices of the institutional salespeople and the retail salespeople, maybe they share the same conference rooms or something. If we have any thoughts that may happen, then we're going to classify it as retail and the rules would apply, right? So that's why most of the time we're going to say for institutional use only. And then, we're afraid, you got to believe in human trafficking, original sin, that retail brokers might make it sound like it's some kind of special thing because it says institutional, which is certainly not the case. So any person other than an institutional investor, regardless of whether the person has an account with a firm, and then that's the testable distinction. That has to be approved by a principal pre-distribution. So our test question is to know the definition and then what that definition then means in terms of principal approval. Let me clear my slide. Retail communication is treated as retail communication if the member has reason to believe communication will be made available that's not institutional. We just talked about that. I'm thinking at some point I may write someday or, put on the channel just a whole kind of lecture about written supervisory procedures, WSPs. And so we all have to have written supervisory procedures. And if we plan on saying that the principal isn't going to prove anything prior to first use, then we have to make sure that we have a provision for the education and training of those associated persons. And that's documented and we include it in our written supervisory procedures. We ask every new hire to read the written supervisory procedures of the broker dealer. And then we ask them to sign, acknowledge it, and that they read it and they understood it. And we might have in our written supervisory procedures, for example, that the principal is going to audit a percentage of the email traffic And then you're going to be held accountable for whatever you said in your written supervisory procedures, your written supervisory procedures. I like this nice little overview here in terms of what's happening, in terms of what we're discussing, right? Let's just get out our highlighter. So institutional, no pre-approval required with the training plan. And again, I think that's very low risk because we really don't care about questions about protecting institutional investors because, as I said, they're capable of protecting their own interest. Now, if it's retail, as we said, retail principal pre-approval is required, or that's for the more than 25. If it's correspondence, 25 or fewer, as we said, that's the testable distinction. Now we're going to talk about public appearances, and that may again require principal approval depending on what's going on. And electronic communication will depend on the audience. If you're a first-year firm, we don't assume that you know about good taste. I'm joking. But as a first-year firm, all retail communications have to be filed with FINRA at least 10 business days prior to first use. Very testable. It's also testable to what makes your first year firm, right? A new firm is a first year of operations. Now, as an established firm, you're going to file retail communications with FINRA 10 days, within 10 days of first use. So either before or after, depending on the status of the firm. The vast majority of brokerage firm records are 3-year records, including retail communications. Now, be careful. There are certain types of retail communication that even if you're an established firm would require you to file those within 10 days of first use, or excuse me, at least 10 days prior to first use. And we'll be talking about that. So, there's certain types of advertisements, sales literature, retail communication that will have to be filed at least 10 business prior to first use, regardless of whether you're a new firm or an established firm. One of those is CMOs, all derivatives. So collateralized mortgage obligations are derivative securities. They derive their performance from a portfolio of mortgage that's been carved up into various cascading cash flows. And a lot of retail investors are confused about these kind of structured products. They're confused about what they are or not buying. We're afraid they might think they're buying proportion ownership in a pool of mortgages. That's not what they're buying. They're buying a cash flow from that. So if you are going to allow reps to sell CMOs, some firms do, some firms don't, we're going to have to make sure they're adequately trained so they can determine suitability. We're also going to offer the customers educational material about collateralized mortgage obligations that discusses the interest rates and prepayments and how it affect the cascading cash flows, their PACs, their tax, whatever the case may be, and provide them a glossary of terms that tells them about, what the PSA model is all about and all that kind of stuff. But the main point for the test takers is to know that has to be filed regardless of what kind of firm you are within 10 business days of first use. It's always important to make sure we never make unfair comparisons, right? So an unfair comparison would be to compare a cascading cash flow CMO, collateralized mortgage obligation, a tranche, with some other kind of fixed income investment vehicle, right? And we also should show them what the effect on interest rates going down and people paying off the mortgage early would do to whatever cash flow it is that they're holding. Main testable point is CMOs derive their performance from mortgages, a pool of mortgages. Therefore, they're derivative securities. All derivative securities do require that retail communications filed within 10 business days of first use. Options are derivatives as well, right? Options are derivatives as well. Options derive their performance from the underlying interest. And so retail communications on options have to be approved by a Series 4, a registered options principal. Prior to the options disclosure document delivery, retail communications, that's the main test point. Like any other derivative, it has to be filed or submitted to FINRA 10 calendar days in advance for approval. You can use, a lot of firms like to use projected and historical performance. For example, I'll show you covered call right and what that looked like, a historical covered call right or one we're proposing. And that's fine as long as we, again, make the disclosures about, historical performance. We better say in our sleep past performance is not indicative of future results. If you take a 4 or in 9, they get a little more in the weeds about, at what point can you analyze returns and what are the disclosures that need to be made. The main one for us in this little carve out lecture is to know that options and CMOs are derivatives, and therefore they need to be submitted to FINRA within 10 calendar days in advance for approval. By the way, I don't really like the approval word. It's really not approval. So I probably should clean up this slide. They neither approve nor disapproves of anything, but, no news, what we're saying here would be good news, and bad news would be they call you and ask you for additional information. So I don't really like that this slide here, I've got approval. That's not quite the right word. There's 2 nasty words we never use in the securities industry. They're approval and guarantee. We never say that, right? So bad me, I probably should go back and fix the slide. In fact, I'll tell you what, I will fix the slide. I'll just fix the slide on the fly. This may be a bad idea, but I think I can do it. There we go. Fixed. Mutual fund communication. A lot of times mutual funds or, broker dealers will come up with some ranking where they're number 1 or they're number 2 or whatever they are. Now, if that's Morningstar or some third party that has come up with this, that's different than if you, the mutual fund, have actually come up with the ranking. So it's a mutual fund ranking, not independent or from a third party. That too would require a prefile with FINRA. And if it's a mutual fund bond fund, volatility ratings would be subject to a prefile. Well, we've talked about this before. We said every firm has to have written supervisory procedures. And in their written supervisory procedures, they got to have what are their policies and procedures for social media. Some firms are a little looser and some are a little tighter in terms of allowing associated persons to use social media. Now, static means it's not going to change. So, for example, my LinkedIn profile doesn't change, or, we're not talking about updating, but it's static, meaning I don't every day change anything. Interactive means that you're interacting with folks, and that would be kind of like the comment section, right? So here on my YouTube channel, there's certain parts of the YouTube channel that are static, and there's certain parts that are interactive, the comment section, for example. Now, the static, like a personal profile on LinkedIn, is a retail communication. It requires principal approval. Back when I was a practitioner and I had my firm, one of my reps had a LinkedIn profile, but the contact information was their personal contact information. And I said, well, listen, that's inappropriate. And, he told me he's just using it like Facebook, and, he just doesn't like Facebook. I said, well, listen, that's not, if you hold yourself out as being part of Gamma Global, that's how that should be. And I need to approve that. That requires principal approval. Now, the comment section, public appearances, for example, in the comment section, that's interactive. And that doesn't require principal approval, but it does require supervision, right? So that's the difference between the two. Static requires principal approval, interactive does not. It just requires supervision. Now, the other concept I'd be aware of here is what's called entanglement. And what entanglement means is that FINRA says that if you are going to interact in social media, that you can be held accountable for the entire thread. So, what that means, somebody says, hey, Dean, thanks for tripling my money. And I go, oh, I wish I had the opportunity to do that for everybody. And, as far as FINRA is concerned, I just claim that I'm tripling people's money. So I'd be aware of the concept called entanglement. Variable life. I couldn't decide whether to put this in this or not. Public communication regarding variable life. And I decided to do so because a low probability, but questions do show up about communication regarding variable life. Life insurance isn't a securities product, but variable life has an embedded separate account. And so, first rule is you're never supposed to sell life insurance as an investment. So variable annuities can be sold as investments, right? Because that's a non-qualified, plan, retirement plan, for example. Whereas this is not. So you're not supposed to sell life insurance as investment products. And, we have to tell them about the effect on the surrender for charges or fees they're going to pay the insurance company in the early years. And the other thing, if we're going to do a performance illustration, not a guarantee, but a hypothetical. So a hypothetical performance on variable life is okay, But if you assume this rate of, you can assume in the hypothetical a rate as high as 12%, but then you have to throw in a zero in there. Now, the reason I threw this in is because I haven't had anybody ever tell me they've seen this until very recently. So I decided to throw that into this discussion. May compare it to other investment products, term and invest the difference. So you can show what variable life does as comparison to term and invest the difference, and you can't compare it to whole life. That's traditional insurance. Public appearances. So participation in a seminar, a webinar, a forum. Again, interactive content is the key point, a radio or television interview, other public appearance or public speaking activity. The point is, again, must be supervised. So, we have to make sure that, everything's copacetic in terms of that public appearance. Now, the documentation, the scripts for the seminar, the slides, the handouts, it's retail communication. And remember, the point is, if it's retail communication, it requires principal approval predistribution. If it's not retail communication, it just needs to be supervised. And that would be, again, the difference. Research reports are considered retail communication or sales literature because we're hoping you'll be impressed and open an account and do some business with us. Now, we don't have to, be careful on this one. I don't have to refer to my past selections. But if I do say, hey, in this communication I'm making, we're thinking research report here, and I do refer to a past recommendation, well, then it triggers the disclosure of my entire universe of selections. I can't cherry pick. And I have to show you that entire universe for the previous 12 months. I also have to tell you whether we served as an underwriter to the issuer if we're publishing a research report. Recruitment ads. You're not allowed to run blind ads. The only ad you're allowed to run blind. What we mean by that blind ad is not disclose prominently the name, address, and contact information for the broker dealer is a recruitment ad. You can run a blind recruitment ad in terms of that, reply with your curriculum vitae to PO box. When broker got in trouble, he ran a blind ad and he said, for an honest broker, call 1-800, and had his phone number. He got all kinds of responses, but it departs from this. So we can't run a blind ad except for recruitment. Testimonials, we have to disclose whether testimonials are being paid for. Franklin Fund Distributors, Franklin Templeton Fund Distributors is a FINRA member firm, and they're a fine firm, but they got in a little trouble because they had Joe Montana on television saying wonderful things about the Franklin funds. Now, unfortunately, the ad agency doesn't know these rules we're discussing, and they didn't disclose that Joe Montana is not there because he's been dollar cost averaging in the Franklin funds. He's there because he was being compensated. And so, we have to tell you that Joe is, being compensated to say wonderful things about Franklin Templeton funds. Again, so it just needs to be disclosed. By the way, on the test, if they ever ask, should something be disclosed, you would say yes, right? Sunlight is the best disinfectant. When you think about it, that's kind of different than other industries. I saw an athlete being interviewed and they asked him what he likes better, Xbox or PlayStation. He says, I don't have an endorsement deal with either. So basically you pay him, he'll say wonderful things about you. Call me a cynic. I don't believe that we open up Tiger Woods' garage, we find out a bunch of Buick Regals in there. He's on television talking about Buicks. In our business, they'd have to tell us whether Tiger actually drives a Buick. Okay, so hope you found that little carve out to be worthwhile. And like I say, I'll post this. We try and put something up every week. And so let me clean this up, stop the share. And we'll hopefully see you in a Tuesday weekly live. We do a community weekly live stream on Tuesdays, 5:30 from Las Vegas. You're welcome to join us. We also explicate any questions you have from any vendor on any exam. So just send that my way. I do that on the Reddit. I don't put too many shorts on the channel. So you can find me on our sister communities, which is R Series 7 on Reddit. That's for the SIE and the Series 7. You can find us at R66. That's a Reddit for 63s, 65s, and 66. And you can find us at R24. That's for 9, 10s, and 24s. And I'll see you Tuesday, or I'll see you next time we put out some new content for you. Try and keep a publishing schedule weekly. Sometimes I hit it, sometimes I don't.